working. Good morning. Okay, clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. I haven't done that since camp counseling days. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome to the second day of our Positive Business Conference. I was in the room getting mic'd up, and I was talking to Chris, and I said it's either our second day or our last day, whether you're a glass half empty or a glass half full kind of guy. And Dean DeRue was getting mic'd up, and his head snapped, and he said, this is a Positive Business Conference. It better be half full. In fact, it better be full. It better be overflowing. So I hope you're overflowing. Someone had a quote yesterday from Angela Maya. You had that, right? People will forget what you did. They'll forget what you say, but they will remember how they made you feel. Just some shout outs. How did you feel about yesterday's events, the sessions? Just words. Energized. Inspired. Excellent. Positive. Sorry? Affirmed. Sorry? Motivation. Empowering. Great. Let's keep that going. That's our goal today, is to keep it going. So we want to just quickly walk through the agenda this morning and then set up our first session. So we can have the next slide. We're going to begin with some mainstay sessions this morning, beginning with a conversation with Dean DeRue, Patty Poppe, and Chris White, who I'll introduce in a second. We'll have a refreshment break from 10 to 10:30, and then we'll break out into workshop groups. So you'll scatter again around the building and go to your sessions. We'll have lunch in the Winter Garden from 11:45 to 1. And then we'll go to mainstay sessions from 1 to 2:45, a short refreshment break, and then our final session. And it will conclude with, which is always fun at this conference, we have been taking pictures all the way through this. You can see our hard-working photographer over here. How many pictures have you taken so far? 985. Okay, you're going to see 985. Oh, okay. 145 pictures from the event, and it's really nice to see the energy. All the words you just described, you'll see it on pictures as we wrap up the event, okay? So with that, I want to introduce our speakers for our first main stage panel. Yesterday, I got to introduce my interim department chair and my area chair, my two immediate bosses. Now I get to introduce my dean, my real boss. So I better not get this wrong, so I'm going to punt. And I'm going to read a description of Dean DeRue from Poets and Quants. Scott DeRue happens to be one of the real visionaries in business and management education today, and he really has been. He's been a powerhouse stepping into the dean's office. It's been really fantastic to watch him just take the reins and run with it. And if you don't know this about Dean DeRue, when he's not the dean of the school, he's climbing mountains. And so he's summited Everest. And then he also took a group of students to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. How cool is that? So that is our dean, and we're very, very proud of him and proud of the work he's doing. He is going to be talking with Patty Poppe, who took over as CEO of Consumers Energy in 2016. And again, a presence. She has really made a presence known. The polar vortex this past winter and the statements you were making, asking people, look, we're getting close to a brownout. Would you please maybe use a little less power? And then when there were power outages, going on TV saying, we're really sorry this happened. We're working as hard as we can to make this right. And really projecting Consumers Energy into the community in a very, very positive way. They're going to be, this conversation is going to be run by Chris White, who used to be the director of the Center for Positive Organizations, and most importantly, he is a new dad. So he's, oh. So with that, I would like to introduce our three panelists up on the stage.
So the three of us were listening to the generous introductions, and Patty's reflection was, wow, that was the only thing that got applause, you being a new dad.
He climbs Kilimanjaro.
He climbs mountains. I'm a Fortune 500 CEO, but you're a new dad. Well, it is pretty genuinely life-changing. So I am not in the cliche way, but in the literal way, because I didn't sleep much last night. So if I say anything silly, you know why. But it's my privilege to host this conversation this morning. I won't add much to Andy's introductions. All I will do is a bit of what we call at the Center for Positive Organization strength spotting, and say from my experience in interacting with Patty and with Scott, just 3 things that I really admire about you both as people and as leaders. And so Scott, I admire your drive, your dynamism, and your passion in all that you say and do. You live life and lead to the fullest. I appreciate that. And Patty, I admire your brilliant mind, your ability to integrate complex ideas and make them simple, how relatable you are to all kinds of people, and your curiosity, your genuine curiosity. And with that groundwork, I think we have the basis for a wonderful conversation this morning, because we've got 50 minutes together. I prepared some questions, and I have a quick fire round prepared that I would actually love your input on where we focus in the 50 minutes together as well. Our focus is on purpose and people. So I'd like to invite you to introduce yourselves a bit more with this question. When you think about crucible moments when your identity is most formed, I'd like you to each share a challenging time that really refined your own sense of purpose and identity. Patty, would you like to go?
Okay.
That's that softball that he threw up.
Yeah, I know. Give me a second to think about it. Yeah, so here we go. Yeah, there was a time in my career where I would suggest I was at a crossroads. So I had actually joined DTE Energy, and I know I have some DTE friends in the house. Where are they? There they are. I had joined DTE. You're going to learn some things here, team. I've not confessed this publicly before. But I had joined in a continuous improvement function at the company, and I was excited about that. And I had been in operations my whole career. And I had gotten wind that the next day I was going to be appointed power plant director for these 5 plants up near Port Huron area. And I was not too excited about that. I thought, oh, geez. I've been running plants my whole career. It was time for something different. And on that day, I got a phone call from a friend of mine. And it was so interesting. She's a professional, professional coach. And it was out of the blue, she called me. We hadn't probably talked in a year. It was just pure blessing. She called me and I said, well, look, tomorrow they're going to offer me this job. I'm going to turn it down. I have no interest in that, yada, yada. She goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. She said, have they ever assigned someone new to run their power plants? They're some of their most important assets. And I was like, well, probably not. Have they ever assigned a woman to run all those power plants? I was like, oh, geez. No. And she said, maybe they think it's a big deal. I was like, oh, gosh, darn it. All right. And I was thinking, here's what I was telling myself before she called. I knew about all that. What more do I need to know about operations? Well, let me just fast forward. Because I felt like I already knew how to run operations, I had to really challenge myself. What am I going to learn? What could I learn now? And by the grace of God, I was introduced to a person and a book called Joy at Work by Dennis Bakke. And it was all about power generation, actually, plants that AES, a different company, had run, and how they had empowered frontline workers to absolutely run the business. And until then, in my operations career, that was ludicrous. Like, there's a hierarchy, there's rules, people do what they're told, yada, yada. I had actually subscribed to that. I'm sorry, everybody. I've transformed my leadership since then. But it was a complete awakening for me. And because I was out in the hinterlands and the bosses weren't too close, and they didn't pay that much attention to what was going on up there, we got to try some things. And we experienced with cross-functional frontline teams really running the facilities and running the plants and finding joy at work through the decision-making and ownership. And it truly transformed my leadership, my life, my pursuit. And so I guess the rough spot, like, oh, brother, what am I going to do now, actually opened something extraordinary up and took my leadership to a totally different level and actually changed the trajectory of my leadership life, I'm quite certain.
I just have a quick follow-up question. So in that crucible moment where you had a decision point, you were hearing some doubts, some concerns, you might have had some doubts and concerns of your own. How did you find the courage or the bravery to persist and move through it anyway?
Well, what was important for me was, what was compelling to me was maybe there was something for someone else in this. This, role model that I sometimes think, how can I be a role model? I'm just this girl from Napoleon, And it turns out that I could be a role model, and when I discovered I could make the difference in people's lives and really stretch my leadership to make a difference in people's lives as a leader, that became quite motivating and compelling, and it just shifted my thinking. When I made it about someone else, not about me and what's in it for me, well, let's go do something great for someone else, became quite motivating.
Mm-hmm. So the power of being motivated by the impact you can have on someone else rather than any self-doubt or doubts others were projecting onto you helped to move fast. So Scott, tell us a little bit more about your crucible moment, and we'll see if there are things we can play with together.
Sure. So when you asked that question, the first thing that came to mind for me was when I discovered agency. And so I was very early in my career. So a little context, I grew up in a one-stoplight town, and some of you know this. I grew up in a one-stoplight town in nowhere, North Carolina, where very few people ever left that town. Very few people went to college, very few people left the town. And I did. I had the opportunity to go to college and found myself in New York and Boston, these big cities, in rooms that I probably shouldn't be in, working with people I probably shouldn't have the opportunity to work with, et cetera. And I was always getting ahead or finding opportunities by proving to others that I could do it, that I was good enough. And the way that it was happening is I figured out what they wanted or needed, and then I did that. And that was the early part of my career. And I was miserable. Absolutely miserable. Because it was always, what does that person need? What does that person expect? And how can I live up to what they want? And I was miserable, and I went through this period of time, and similar to you, had a conversation with someone in my life that I didn't know was going to be transformative, but was. And the question was simply, what do you want, and who do you want to be when you grow up, in effect? And I love business, but I was transformed by education. The opportunity to go to a university like the University of Michigan changed my life in really positive and profound ways. And so that connection to business and that connection to education for me was everything. If you put those two things together, the only thing you want to be in life is a business school professor. That's it.
Well, that was easy.
That's it. And so the defining moment in my life was walking into my boss's office. Now, my boss at the time was a founder of one of the largest consulting firms in the world, still to this day, tried to buy the Los Angeles Dodgers, to give you a sense of the type of person we're talking about. And I walked into his office and I said, Ralph, I've figured out who I want to be in life. And I expected him to support me, etc. And I said, Ralph, I want to be a business school professor. And I'm going to go back to graduate school and become poor and go to school and get a PhD and hopefully land at a place like the University of Michigan. And he said, quote, that's the worst possible career decision I could imagine anyone ever making. And at that moment, my life changed. Because I stopped caring about proving to him how good I was or doing what he wanted and following my own path and my own sense of purpose. And up until that point in my life, I didn't have agency. I didn't have a clear sense of purpose of who I wanted to be, and I wasn't making life choices that were consistent with that. And that's when, in some sense, I grew up. And every choice that I've made since then in life has been connected to this deep sense of purpose not simply what everybody else wants. And for me, that's one of the most defining moments of my life, and it really has defined my career in really powerful ways.
So I love that story and that example. It makes me think of a couple of things that perhaps you could elaborate, both of you could elaborate on. So when I listen to that story, I think of all the stakeholders that must act on your lives, even greater than most of us probably in your roles. Most of us have parents or family members, and we have friends, we have students, employees, staff, faculty, shareholders, all of these stakeholders to manage. And I'm thinking about that in juxtaposition with the quote, which I'll completely ruin right now, but courage is not the absence of fear, it's being afraid and doing it anyway. And so you must, at some level, still fear, I'm going to really annoy this powerful person by just ignoring his or her advice, but doing it anyway. How do you stay connected to your purpose and move anyway, even in those moments where you know there's going to be a reaction? How do you stay focused on the impact, even when you know there's consequences for another part of the system? Patty, Scott, either of you want to jump in with that?
Sure. So just as context, that was the last day he and I ever talked.
So there were consequences.
And so the choices you make in life do have consequences. And the question is, are you willing to have the courage to use your language to incur those consequences, right? I'll connect it. So Andy mentioned that I climb mountains. There are a lot of people who climb big mountains, whether it's in figuratively or literally. And people believe that when you go climb a mountain like Everest, which people are doing right now, it's Everest season, that these people would have no fear. And that's actually not the case at all. I feel fear just like anyone else, whether it's at work, whether it's on a mountain. And the question is, what do you do with that fear? And can you turn that fear into focus? I think people differ quite dramatically in that. Some people get overwhelmed with that fear, and some people are able to turn that fear into focus and laser-like intense in terms of doing what they need to do. And I think that for me, surrounding myself with people who can help me process that fear and turn that into focus and help me direct that, because none of us can do that on our own. And so having that support system around you has been critically important for me.
The team.
Yeah.
No Michigan conference is allowed to pass
Without saying that.
In the famous
Patty, would
words
you like
of-
to add anything?
Yeah, I'm reflecting on our most recent commitment to clean energy, and I know when we, as a management team of consumers, relatively new management team, came together to really challenge ourselves about our commitment to environmental stewardship. And I'll tell you, it was there was a time at my company where mentioning climate change really wasn't allowed, truth be told. And when we had our sort of confessional and we all admitted that we believed it was happening, that maybe we should do something about it. And it was sort of like that. I mean, there was a whole process, took days to get there, but
Kill the cameras now.
yeah. So we came to this conclusion that we had an obligation to take action. And we were united in each other's leadership. But trust me, there were stakeholders that were very dubious on both sides. One, that we meant it, and two, that it was true. And so coming to the conclusion of what is our commitment, and we wanted to commit beyond compliance. We didn't want to wait for the rules to be passed to direct us what to do. We wanted to take a leadership role. We retired 7 of our coal plants ahead of time. Thank you. 7 of our 12. I mean, it was a big deal. It was a big deal, so thank you for clapping. That we've taken actions that were questionable. What we anchored in was what is best for Michigan. Now, you could admit that that's also best for the planet in total. But it was very important to us to think about what was best for the people that we are so privileged to serve, and literally our friends and our families and our neighbors. And it sounds cliche, but it's true. I live next door to my sister and my dad, and they're both family, customers, and friends, thankfully. And not all family is always friends, but mine are. But so this whole idea that we really could make a difference. And so in the face of the resistance, we learned more, we have done more, we've made some very strong, we've taken strong actions, and we're taking further actions. People have become believers, but in the points of conflict, when people challenge certain aspects of the best path to the future of carbon-free energy, we just remind ourselves all the time, and in fact we use the mantra, what is the best plan for Michigan? And it changes how the lawyers think about it, it changes how the engineers think about it, it changes how the operations people think about it, and it just takes us to this purpose positioning, and we call it our high ground. We can stay on that high ground and make those tough decisions.
Thank you. And let's stay on the topic of purpose and in the state of Michigan. And I'm just going to bridge over to Scott. Scott, who is Eric Schwartz? This guy looming over us.
So,
Actually, and the follow-up part is, why is he important to what we're doing here at Ross?
So Eric is an assistant professor of marketing here at the Ross School of Business, University of Michigan. He's a data scientist and quickly becoming one of my academic heroes. He's doing fascinating work. So Eric had been here for a few years, and the Flint water crisis occurred. And now remember, he's a marketing professor. So when he first got interested in working on the Flint water crisis, there were a number of questions circulating around the building as to why, and how are you going to connect this to your work in marketing? And the reason I say academic hero is not because of the work that he's publishing or producing, all of that's great, but the courage to follow his path and block out many of the naysayers, some of us senior faculty in this room, saying, why are you doing this? He listened, but he was still able to craft a path. So here's what happened. So the Flint water crisis occurs. He gets interested in the problem and doesn't assume he has the answer. He actually embeds himself and immerses himself in the community, all the stakeholders, the residents of Flint, the local government, and so forth, and just starts listening and trying to understand what's the problem, why did it occur, etc. And to put some context on this, there are about 60,000 homes in Flint. And the issue, part of the issue, is the corrosion and the lead in the pipes, an infrastructure problem. And so it's pretty easy to assume that it's an infrastructure issue, right? We just need to fix all the infrastructure. Well, guess what? That's really hard to do in a city the size of Flint. And so he's listening and discovers that it's not simply an infrastructure problem, it's also an information problem. So there are 55 to 60,000 homes in Flint, and when he started working with the city, they had visited and addressed less than 40 homes. Okay? And when a follow-up question was asked, well, why is that? The answer was something to do with, we can't identify where the lead pipes are. Because the entire infrastructure is not lead. You have copper, right, which is safe. You have lead, but you don't know where it's at. Well, that's an information problem. And a data scientist who is used to studying consumer problems, right, how do I identify my customers, et cetera, connects to that information problem. So then the next step was to get faculty and students from across campus, here in Ann Arbor, University of Michigan, Flint, and others, and come together and say, what publicly available data do we have? And I'm going to fast forward this story, but what they did is they took all of this publicly available data, using the data science techniques that he's very good at applying to marketing problems, and built an algorithm that enables his team to identify that your house in Flint has a 91% chance of having lead pipes, and Patty, your house right beside Chris's has a 12% chance of having lead pipes. which now the city of Flint is using to prioritize, one, where are the lead pipes, and two, how to prioritize our investments in new infrastructure. Okay? And now you have cities across the country, Pittsburgh, and I mean, so there are many, many Flints waiting to happen in the United States. Okay, I was in New York yesterday. New York, New Jersey, same problem. My home state of North Carolina, same problem. All over the United States. So now we're thinking about how do we take this intellectual property, this algorithm, and scale it to have an impact in our community, but starting with Michigan.
Yeah.
Because it's not just Flint, right? This is the work of an assistant professor who's a data scientist typically studying marketing problems that's now thinking about how do I use what I'm really good at to have an impact in our state? And if we're able to do that, how do we have an impact nationally? If you walk across the campus, we're building what we're calling an impact studio, which is a physical place where faculty and students from across campus can come together to take on the world's biggest problems. Okay, that's what it'll be. Our pilot this winter was Flint water. How do we take this intellectual property that his team has developed and scale it to get it to Pittsburgh, to get it to New York, New Jersey, et cetera, et cetera. That's the type of work that when somebody is connected to a sense of purpose, a deep sense of purpose, and has, in this case, some pretty advanced skills and tools in his toolkit, right? Connected to that sense of purpose, even though the world is saying, what are you doing? You're crazy, right? He's able to see beyond that, and now we end up with an unbelievable impact in our communities, and in particular for the state of Michigan, which I am so excited about.
And that's a great example, I think, of the freedom, I guess, that you've encouraged amongst academia here at Ross and our scholars here at Ross to do applied research. Research that actually makes a difference in the world, not stays bound up in 30-page, impenetrable scholarly articles with lots of citations, as well as...
So Chris, if I can just clarify a little bit of what you're saying.
Clarify what I say.
The scholarly articles that are normally written and attributed to academia in some sense, there's an impact there. But the primary audience is different than what most people read or expect. The primary audience is the scholarly community, right? And that's how we advance knowledge. And that's a really important function in society. And we have to keep doing that. The basic research that is the foundation of academia is critically important. In addition to that, it's not or, it's not but, it's and. In addition to that, how do we take that basic research? The University of Michigan invested $1.5 billion last year in research. Okay, we are an R&D engine. The question is, how do we take that investment and bring it to life in ways that has a direct impact in our communities? Right? And that's what we're starting to do, and what we're giving our faculty and our staff and our students, and it's all of those coming together, is not only the freedom to do that, but the incentives to do that, the physical space to come together and do that, so that we can build the research enterprise that is not only doing that basic research, but is directly having an impact, and often in partnership with industry. I mean, if we think about what we're doing from a sustainability perspective, it's partnerships with organizations like consumers that enable us to scale and bring that to life.
So just one final thing, I'd love then, Patty, to hear a story as well. How do you think that both and approach to research, both advance scholarly knowledge and have impact, affects how people like Eric come to work every day?
I fundamentally believe, and the research, the basic research backs this up, the number one motivator for people at work, if you look across studies, is does my work matter? And if the answer to that is yes, so we call it the contribution hypothesis, there's a stream of research that calls it task significance, there's all sorts of different language for this. But does my work matter? Right? The impact that you referred to. I want everybody who walks through our doors, students, staff, faculty, to understand how their work matters, and for our faculty to see a vision for what's possible. that research that you spend years doing that you only get negative feedback around. What enables you to be resilient and persistent is not only the intrinsic love for that process and doing it, but also to see and feel the impact that you can have through that work. We're getting faculty to come here because of that freedom and the incentives that we have around it, and just the emphasis on doing work that's going to have an impact, no matter if it's the scholarly community, if it's the practitioner community, if it's the state of Michigan and our residents. People want to be connected to purpose.
Thank you. Let's build on that, Patty. Who's Jimmy Brady? And why is he so important to consumers? And if you'd like to elaborate, who's this little dude too?
Jimmy's neighbor's son. Jimmy, our story is going to be slightly different, but I think emblematic of the purpose that we're trying to create at Consumers. Our purpose statement is world-class performance delivering hometown service, because we know that we really are a hometown company, but we're backed up with this world-class engine of, really important work that we do. And I talk to customers every week, and I made a call to a customer who had written a letter to, or had called my office about something, and I called him back, and he told me a story that they had received a notice that they were going to have a temporary power outage because we were doing some maintenance in on his circuit. And that was going to be a real problem for he and his wife, because his wife was having chemotherapy, and the outage was scheduled a day or two after her treatment. And anyone who's ever been through chemotherapy knows that those are tough days. And he was very emphatic that he needed to care for his wife. They had been married for 60 years. And so all of these, he was telling me this whole story, and then he went on to say, and so one of your co-workers visited me, and his name is Jimmy Brady. And Jimmy Brady visited the customer because he found out he was concerned about the outage schedule. And Jimmy quickly assessed the situation and realized that they didn't have the financial ability to go somewhere else and be comfortable in the winter when there was going to be a power outage. And so Jimmy went and got a gas card, and he asked our customer, Jimmy asked our customer, so if you could go someplace warm and comfortable, where would that be? And the customer said, Pizza Hut. Jimmy's like, I was going to take him anywhere. It's Consumers on your porch, really? Pizza Hut? But that's what he wanted, Pizza Hut. So Jimmy went and got a Pizza Hut gift card and a gas gift card, and this is when the customer telling me the story got quite emotional. And so do I. He went to CVS and got a Get Well card too. Now, it's a small thing, right? But for that man who had been caring for his wife so dutifully, to have someone care for him in such a simple way. Mm-hmm. And then he said, Jimmy should be in a different line of work. I said, no. Jimmy's in the perfect line of work. Don't get any ideas. We need Jimmy. Because not only did he deliver this total hometown service, no bureaucracy. He didn't need to call someone and have this chain of command and what have you. But we also got the circuit work done. And this is the part that's so interesting. Like, we can still deliver world-class performance, but it can be delivered in this hometown way. And so after I hung up with the customer, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so nice. I am Jimmy. Now, Jimmy's out in Grand Rapids, and he sees an I am from me, and I said, Jimmy, when you have a minute, give me a call. Here's my cell phone. And then I put in parentheses, yes, it's really me, and no, it's not an emergency. So like 30 seconds later, my phone rings. He's like, yes. I said, Jimmy, it's cool. It's Patty. And so, we just talked for a few minutes, and Jimmy was like, look, I said, who gave you permission? Like, what was in your thinking about this? And he's just like, I just knew that he needed something simple We needed to get the work done, and I could do it in this hometown way, and that's what we talk about all the time. And it's stories like this that create the expectation for my coworkers, and both the expectation, like, don't just stop at getting the work done. Do it in a way that has just that little extra hometown service, but it's also permission, because we're people serving people. And if we allow that humanness to show up, and it's not always procedure A, B, C, D, it's about being human in a work environment. I think you're right, this motivation that my work matters, that's the part of the work that matters. Like, I got another letter from a customer. She said, Patty, I'm sure you don't get too many thank you letters for digging up your customer's yard. But your crew was here and they did a really good job, and they moved my meter. I had the latest technology. I'm happy about that. And they were very careful with my plants and my garden. She said, and then, I always love the and then, they noted that the halo on my garden angel had fallen off, and so they took a minute and welded it back on.
That's cool.
Come on, Mrs. Butterfield, like, I'm like, that is good stuff. You know, how do you make that true? You know, there's something really special about that. And as you were reflecting on this, people need to know their work matters. You know, my professional and personal leadership stand for my company is that 100%, every one of my coworkers knows when they come to work every day that they're making a difference, that they are owners of this company, and that they are loved by their leaders. And I think there's something intentional about leadership that can, if you are intentional, and I feel like our intention at work makes a difference in people's lives, and you can't then script it, you can't procedure it, you can't policy it. It becomes people being able to express their contribution in their personal way and feeling free and safe to do so. And I find that like a life's journey. Like, that is, I will be on my deathbed working on that. You know, how do you make more people feel like they make a difference and that they're loved and that they are owners?
But what I love about that story is the care and compassion that you role modeled to reach out to Jimmy, to reach out to these individuals, because they're telling their friends and their colleagues about the conversation they had with Patty. And that's cascading that love by the leaders. That's cascading that down through the organization in ways that I don't think in many cases we even realize.
Yeah, I forget that part.
You
know, the other thing that is, I think, interesting about it is people will ask me, do your investors care about that? Really? Okay, let's talk about those people. Well, here's how I have translated the word investor. For me, has evokes a particular image. You know, like if I made you all scribble a cartoon of investor, I'm sure we would have a variety.
She's doing it right now.
Well, she is. Well, yeah, you scribble your version, and then I'll tell you my version. Here's my version of investor. It's a retired person who has invested their life savings in our company and have entrusted with us their daughter's wedding fund, their cabin up north fund, their retirement. Their hard-earned dollars have been entrusted to us that we should keep our promise to them. And for me, that's a lot more inspiring than some fat cats on Wall Street. And so when I talk to investors, and on our earnings call just this quarter, I told the Jimmy Brady story. Now, some people would say, why do investors care about that? What they care about is that we are human and that the leaders of this company are close to our people and our customers. And that is a more sustainable business model. We have a likelihood of delivering consistent performance when we think about our investors in that particular way, that they're part of the formula, they're part of our constituency that we serve. And we think about our coworkers in that particular way. So bringing together this, what we call our triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit, those three things go together. And I think I've been inspired myself that our investors actually care a lot about that. They always ask me for my stories and the story of the month, and they find it a good reason to stay with our company because they know we're caring for them too.
I'd love to stay on this topic, and we're just going to go to this area that I'm fascinated by scale when it comes to purpose, that there are only so many people on any given day that we can interact with and impact directly. And have any of us ever been inspired by a PowerPoint presentation to change our purpose, or a Word document?
This one's pretty good.
Well, actually, yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Should have seen Vic Streckers. Vic Streckers was pretty good. How do you inspire, how do you give that permission to people like Jimmy, or give that safety to someone like Eric on the tenure track to take risks with their research, to go ahead and take that extra step to weld the angel back together? How do you do that at scale of thousands of people? What have you learned along the way?
Well, I do think that just talking about it, telling the stories are so powerful. I remember at a different business school, forgive me, I was at a different business school. I took a class, and on the first day of class, it was a class called How to Make Ideas Stick, or something like that. It didn't stick, apparently. I think that's what it's called.
The irony of it.
The irony, yeah.
Had you been at Michigan Ross, it would have
stuck. Chip Heath is the professor, and maybe you've read his book Switch, or any number of his books. And the first day of class, he had us take statistics, these crime statistics, and he divided the class in half. And he's like, okay, you have take these same statistics and defend that crime has gotten better. You have defend that crime has gotten worse. Come back tomorrow prepared with a 3-minute discussion about that. And so all of us, ambitious students went and prepared our remarks, our 3 minutes, defense of our position. And he broke us up into groups of 6. We each told our story, told our little speeches to each other. And then we came back to the classroom, and he put on a Monty Python video, which I was like, wow, grad school, this is very interesting. And then some very brilliant students were trying to make the correlation between the Monty Python video and the crime statistics. He's like, no, it's a diversion. It had nothing to do with anything. Now, he said, I want you all to write down on a piece of paper what you remember about what your peers said. Now, seems a simple exercise. You all had the same statistics. You should be able to remember. And I thought, my God, I'm going to flunk out of grad school. I can't remember a darn thing those people said. Except for one guy I could remember, because he said, imagine coming home. Your grandmother's china is smashed to the floor. Your CD collection, that's how old I am, but your CD collection, those are things that existed a long time ago. Your CD collection is gone. I remembered that. And so the whole point was, forget the statistics. Tell the story. Make sure people hear the story. So I could give, policy guidance to my workforce. I could tell my coworkers to get out there and serve. But if I don't make it real for them and share what each other does to really live out our purpose, this is a perfect example. I don't know how many times I've started a sentence, a phrase, a conversation with, this is a perfect example of world-class performance, delivering hometown service. They got the gas work done, and they welded the halo on. That whole method, the technique of storytelling is, I know it's proven by all sorts of research, validates that, but in real life, it absolutely works. And that's the method, to deploy our purpose to our coworkers.
Mm-hmm. So stories rippling through
you gotta
the
tell
culture.
them.
Scott, would you add?
I would 100%. I thought the same thing, actually. It reminds me, we created a program here at the school called Story Lab. And it's for this exact purpose, because we want our students leaving here not only understanding how to interpret the stats and come to evidence-based conclusions, but how do you inspire people? How do you compel people to get on board with where you want them to go? And the ability to tell a story is central to that. I was in New York yesterday, and I was talking with a group of people about the importance of student support and financial aid. Now, I can give you all the statistics in the world about the importance of financial aid. But what if I tell you a story about a student who was on this Kilimanjaro trip with me, who during the trip told me about how her mom had been diagnosed with cancer, and how her grandmother had been diagnosed with cancer. And the family was now questioning their ability to pay her tuition for her to finish at the University of Michigan. And she and I are getting to know each other on this trip, and we're going through the trip, and I'm empathizing and helping her brainstorm solutions, et cetera. And we get done with the trip, or the climb, and we're back at the hotel, and the student looks at her phone, and she gets a message from our team, not coordinated by me at all, I had no idea, that says, "Dear so-and-so, want to congratulate you. You've been awarded the Kathy Besant Scholarship, which will cover," and Kathy's from Jackson,
Yes,
who you know.
I know her.
You've been awarded the Kathy Besant Scholarship, and it will cover the remainder of your tuition at the University of Michigan.
Wow.
Now, what's really powerful about that is Kathy Besant was one of the 4 alumni on this trip sitting immediately across the table from her.
Oh my gosh.
And Kathy didn't know about it either,
Wow.
right? That's the power of financial aid. We just transformed that woman's life,
Yes.
right? The ability to tell a story that captures the purpose behind something is fundamental to our ability to scale purpose through an organization. We work in these large, complex enterprises. We don't get the opportunity to be one-on-one with every single individual or every single stakeholder. Your ability to tell a story that people will remember, that they can imagine, that they can connect to that sense of purpose is everything.
So in this arc of our conversation this morning, we've gone from personal leadership and personal journey to organizational leadership. We're going to bring it back around full circle to personal for the remaining few minutes that we have together. To help us bridge into that, I just need some help. Think of this as a round of Jeopardy. So which
Do we have to
category
compete?
would you like? Fire out, whoever comes
I'm going to
first.
lose on smart.
Choose category, real quick. Pick a word. Which one? Proud. Proudest moment as a leader, Scott.
That's how this works?
Whatever comes to you first. Go.
Proudest moment as a leader, watching a student cross the stage last week to graduate who thought that he would not cross that stage a year ago.
Nice.
Nice.
Patty?
I think coming to a settlement agreement on our integrated resource plan, our 20-year energy plan, with the range of the Sierra Club to our largest business customers all signing on that we had the best energy plan for Michigan was a very, very proud moment for us.
Second category, real quick.
Oh, jeez.
I knew. Your Honor.
I'm
Not guilty, Your Honor. Yeah.
I'm guilty?
No. The question is, what is your guilty pleasure?
Okay, I'll go first. I watch The Bachelor. And I justify it by saying I'm studying human dynamics.
Human dynamic. I did mention that Patty's relatable. Okay. Scott?
I'll stay with this theme. So my wife and I made a deal. I went to on this crazy climbing trip December and January, and we made a deal that if she would allow me to go, that she could choose what we watch on television for the remainder of our lives.
Oh, wow.
That's a negotiation.
And at the time,
she's
I
good.
teach negotiations. I didn't anchor it very well. And so I know everything about the holiday baking competition.
Oh, it's really good, too.
But it is an awesome show.
You guys are competitive.
All right. Third, real quick. What does your morning routine look like?
Well, I don't climb mountains, but I do. I work out in the morning, and I go to the office. I mean, that's about it. That's about it.
Yeah, given,
Yeah.
I love this question because given how sustained your performance, both of your performance must be, and the amount of energy you must have to pull it off. Mornings are important. Scott?
Yeah, mornings, so I'm definitely a morning person. I can't remember the last time I worked past midnight. So I don't work in the evenings or anything of that sort. So I get up at 5, usually at the office, 6:30, 7:15, something like that. I don't work out in the mornings, I work out in the evenings. I'm so committed to it, it's the reason I'll leave the office. And so I treat it like a meeting. And it's as important as any other meeting during the day. I'm not perfect at it, but that's what I aspire to. But for me, the couple of hours in the morning before everybody gets here and meetings begin and that sort of thing, from a work perspective, that's everything to me.
Lovely. I wish we had time for all 7. There's probably at least one on there that you're afraid of. So, well, it's probably the guilty one.
Guilty was, yeah.
So we covered it. So in the time that's left, I have just 2 questions for you. Leadership is a journey for everyone. No one has it completely down. What is one of the harder things for you about your own leadership journey? What are your challenges as a leader? And how do you work on it?
So we were laughing before this started. And this question reminds me of it. When you get in these roles, you don't get a ton of positive feedback. It's not the norm. And you were reflecting on how you've started getting these letters from customers that are actually positive. And I asked, what changed? And sometimes it's even hard to explain that. If you walk in my office, you'll see all these cards that people have written that are, I don't say the negative ones, which, and they do write those actually. But I think what's challenging is our emotions and how we present ourselves at work, we know is contagious. And I think we have an opportunity and an obligation or a responsibility to show up with that glass half full, because that's going to be contagious and cascade through the organization. And how do you sustain that over time, right? So our routines are a big part of that, making sure you get sleep and diet and exercise, nutrition, and all that good stuff. But for me, in addition to all of that, is finding these small ways to stay connected to the sense of purpose. You know, you were asking me before we started, how do you stay connected to the impact that we're having? And for me, it's about looking for these little, what I call booster shots of purpose. And so some people will ask me, why do you show up at this event or that event? And it's a very selfish reason in some basic sense. Because that event I've identified as a booster shot of purpose. It's just a way for me to stay connected to the mission, to see our students, to see our faculty, to see our staff in their moment is a way for me to stay connected to that purpose. Last week, graduation is the crescendo of that booster shot of purpose for me. To watch 1,600 students cross that stage and into the next chapter of their life, and to know that we've played a role, sometimes small, sometimes large, in helping them enter into that new chapter is everything. And then you watch the 8,000 to 10,000 family members and friends who are in the audience that are over the moon happy for this individual who has gone through this truly transformative experience. That is a booster shot of purpose, and I think we as leaders have to find those in order to sustain that energy and that connection to mission.
Patty, what's hard for you, and what are you working on as a leader, and how do you do it?
Well, so I'm a little bit of I'm definitely an optimist and an idea a minute kind of person. And so when I became, my team is chuckling over there. When I became the CEO, all of a sudden my ideas seemed so much better to other people.
I know. Your jokes became funnier.
Yeah, right? See, I'm funny. But so I told you I was funny all these years. So I became a little bit like that girl in the movie Frozen. You know, like she would point and all these things would freeze over. I found I have to learn to keep my hands in my pockets, you know, because I have a lot of ideas and it can be very distracting, actually, for a team. and they need time to finish the last idea I had. And it's hard for me to contain my enthusiasm sometimes, and I work on channeling and focus in a way that's going to have the biggest long-term impact, and that can be hard because sometimes just having fun is like right now.
Patty, I love this. We have a dean colleague here on campus. A brief story that will illustrate this as well. So the day he becomes dean, so he and I became dean at the same time, at a different school, and College of Engineering.
Yeah,
So,
he's awesome,
so
by
Dean
the way.
Gallimore at engineering. And so he and I are good buddies. And so he walks into his new office, so the dean's office, and the nameplate that they put on the wall is like a little crooked. It's just a little crooked. And he just casually just says, "Oh, it's a little crooked." 10 minutes later, there are 6 people working on this nameplate.
It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
And so
Leave the nameplate.
Yeah, and so, now people pay attention.
Yeah,
It's
ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
So that would be a whole other conversation about self-regulation, which would be fascinating. So I'm going to give you both the last word in this session, but I want to say before I do, just thank you for the wisdom and inspiration and drive and stamina and commitment and humor that it takes to do what you do every day. We just see a microcosm in it in 50 minutes. My final question to you is this. You have 450 people in this room, all around, who aspire to be positive leaders, aspire to build positive organizations and businesses. What advice would you give them for following in your footsteps? One piece of advice.
I'll
each.
give you the short version in honor of Ari Weinswig. Where is he? He's here in the
Very
house
good.
somewhere. I bored him.
Was in
but,
the house.
he was in that. Well, forget it then. No, I'm still going to quote him. He has a whole, as many of you know, theory about beliefs. And I do think as leaders, some people say, I'll believe it when I see it. And I think as leaders, we have to believe it before we see it and make it true and stand for making something extraordinary happen.
That's great advice. So what else? We're all human. And I think an innate need that all of us have as human beings is to find joy in life. And if we're not joyous, if we're not having fun with what we're doing, I think it's really hard to have the impact you want to have, to sustain that over time. And so my advice would be, make sure you're finding the joy in what you're doing. And if there's not joy there, then go find something else. Because if you're not having fun, if you're not finding the joy in what you're doing, you're not going to have the impact that you aspire to have. And I think it would be a darn shame with the talent that's in this room to wake up at some later chapter in your life and say, if only, or I coulda, shoulda, and what if? Life's too short. And so find the joy in what we're doing. And I think that joy is everywhere. I think there's meaning in every job. I think there's meaning in every role, no matter where you are in the organizational food chain and hierarchy and those sorts of things. But find the joy that's meaningful and purposeful to you. And if it's not there, then start looking somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Please join me in thanking Dean Scott Rue and Patty Poppins.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Please take your water bottle. This is meant to eliminate single-use
yes.
plastic. There you go,
Thank
Patty.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
There you go, Chris. Thanks a lot.
Wow. So much there. I just want to reflect for a moment on what I feel like was a booster shot for me of positive leadership. I want to thank Scott and Patty and Chris for an amazing session. I have a couple of reflections on the session. So one is, I love the holiday baking show. So Scott, if you ever want someone to watch it with, or if your wife does, yeah, perfect. I was really a couple of things about positive leadership. And so what I heard was some inspiration for positive leaders. So how can we bring joy to our organizations, to our clients? And how do we be human so that we can model that for people within our organizations? How do we let our employees know that they are loved? And love is a word sometimes that can be hard to use in the workplace, but I think it's needed. Like, how can we express and show that our employees are loved? How do we inspire? And how do we kind of bring our positive emotions to the workplace? Again, knowing that those are contagious and that those will spread and scale throughout our organizations and throughout our communities. I also love the stories that you both shared. To me, you both expressed a lot of humanness on the stage, and I love the way that you did that through storytelling. I particularly love the story about Jimmy, and it actually brought tears to my eyes as well. The idea of sort of knowing within yourself, through your own sense of purpose and passion, that you have every permission available to just do that thing, to buy that card, to buy that gift card, and to give that gift, to give that kindness, that humanness to another person. And that's actually the perfect segue to our next session, kindness. We all have within our purview, within our roles, the opportunity to express kindness in lots of different ways and to kind of show that sense of humanness through the act of kindness. So our next session is going to invite us to think about kindness and to think about this idea of micro-kindness, so the ways that we can provide kindness in small ways and micro ways throughout our everyday. And so I'm really excited to introduce my friends, Sarika and Anne, to the stage to take us through a very creative exercise where we'll get to experience some kindness right now. So please come to the stage. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That could have gone poorly, so thank you. All right. See how one small act can be infectious?
So the beautiful thing about infections and booster shots and boosters is that they can be intentional, and we can use them in the workplace in very intentional ways. So these micro acts of kindness, which I think Patty really, I think for me, the example was the gift card at the end. So like the beautiful thing that Scott and Patty did for Sarika and I is that they set us up for success today and they didn't even know it. So our theory, and I think the theory of basic research, tells us that these small micro acts of kindness that are actually planned can have ripple effects. You can change a person's day. You can change and better motivate your team. And through that motivation, you can motivate others to do the same. So the question about scaling actually is watching someone else do something for someone, which a lot of you were plants in our audience, doing something for us to get everybody up and moving. That is actually a micro kindness that we want to thank you for. So what we want you to do is leave this experience with the idea that you can put this into action. I know that Chris has already seen this with the sugar cubes. You've been doing micro acts of kindness all along. So we're just trying to help you be a little bit more planful as you leave today's conference into integrating these sugar cubes, these micro acts of kindness, into your workplace so they can have the ripple effects to create a place of joy and a sense of purpose and of motivation for your team.
So we're going to help you do that starting now. So if you can take 60 seconds and just think of examples to yourself of acts of kindness you've participated in or witnessed in your workplace. So 2 to 3 examples, just think about it for yourself for a minute.
All right.
Good?
Okay, you got some in your head? Are you ready?
All right.
Okay.
Okay, stand up. We're going to do a lot of standing today.
Yeah, we're getting you moving. So we want you to try to find someone who you don't know and introduce yourself, 2 or 3 people, and start sharing those ideas.
Got-
Look at that picture of this.
I love it. We'll wait till the buzz.
You can also help them to find someone who's got a lot.
But they do have to switch with each other. Well, 60 seconds is too long. So next we have I know. Can you get my phone? All right, sure. Oh, thank you. That's another way to do that. Right. So much energy. We love
Wow.
it. That's great. All right, so to make sure you put some of that into practice, what we want you to do is if you look behind your name badge, there's a little index card that says Not So Random Acts of Kindness. Please find that. I know, surprise.
Hold it up when you find it so others may know what it looks like. Yeah, perfect.
Hey,
Oh, surprise. Not so random.
so random. So take a minute and just,
Yeah, if you
Wait.
need one and don't have one or didn't
Yes,
find one,
actually,
there are
please raise your
people
hand.
walking down the aisles with pens and cards. So raise your hand if you need one from them.
great. So what we'd like you to do is commit to 3 acts of kindness, write them down in detail on your card, and that's a card you can take with you. You can pin it to your wall, you can tape it to your computer, whatever it is, and it'll be a reminder of things, acts you've committed to. All right.
So now we want to hear your ideas. There are people that are going to be walking around with these really cool microphones that are cubes with the big block M on them. I cannot wait to see how this works. So what I want is just to ask you guys to stand up and share or raise your hand and get that mic. And let's actually pepper these ideas that we're going to bring out into our workplace with intentionality to motivate people to notice their purpose every day. What are some of your ideas? Let's get some more. Great, thank you.
Okay, so I said, hug someone who needs it with their permission.
Good idea.
Encourage someone I don't know, and call someone I have not spoken to in a long time just to say hi.
Beautiful. Anybody else want to share in the inspiration?
Okay.
So we were talking about buttons yesterday, Mindy was, and I thought the library probably has a button machine that I can check out, and I'm on the library board in Ann Arbor. So I want to make buttons for everyone on my team. There's only 15 people, so I think I can do it with hand-drawn illustrations of the things I like about them.
Oh,
Anybody?
Love it.
want the cube? Someone take the cube.
Catch
Come
your
on.
Sorry.
It's soft, I promise.
I can't take credit for the cleverness of this because I copied someone else that had done it, but it's these busted cards. So it says busted, and then on the inside you write what awesome thing that they did. So it's really cute.
Thank you.
We need some volunteers on this side of the room. We cannot have this cube go unused. All right, right here. Thank you.
Hi there. So one of the three I was thinking of is I'm doing a toast this weekend at my sister's wedding, and I'd like to do something to just make everyone smile.
Great.
A couple
We're
more.
so talkative. Come on. Share with the group.
All right. I have one here.
So I'm actually going to write a thank you letter to my second grade teacher, Lorraine Gresky. I didn't go to second grade last year, so this was a little while. But Lorraine and I actually have kept a bit in touch, and she was the person who modeled for me very early on how powerful a way of being is and the ripple effects it causes to others. Because she created an environment in that classroom where I felt loved. So thank her for that.
Anyone else?
One or two more.
I love catching this. So I have two things that I really want to work on. The first is I've always wanted to start learning and practicing on a very regular basis how to meditate. And we have 5 clubs at work, so I'm going to start a 6th, a Monday morning meditation club, and also focus that on some gratitude after talking with somebody here. The other is I have too many team members here, so I can't say too much. But one of the things I really love to do is when I meet team members' families, I love telling the family member what their team member does and the impact it has on my life and everyone else's at work. And I'm going to find a creative way of doing that for everyone because I don't always get to meet them face to face.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
I would like to do the sugar cube that we have seen out in the reception area. And then the other thing is to write thank you notes to staff that work for me.
Beautiful.
We got some up there in the balcony.
Oh, balcony. Oh, yeah.
This will be fun.
There you go.
I'll start here, but we'll get that mic up there. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, I have a colleague somewhere in this room. Her name is Jody, and she leaves Reese's peanut butter cup chilled about once every couple weeks on my desk when I come back from a meeting. It is the coolest thing, so I'm going to start doing that with other colleagues.
You love it. You guys are taking notes on this.
I really wanted to see somebody throw this. I want to comment on what Beth said. So I'm not actually going to share what I shared, but as somebody who brought my family in to work, I work with Beth over there, and it was Bring Your Kids to Work Day, and Beth made a point to pull my wife and kids aside and told her all about the impact that I have at the organization, and I couldn't believe that those words were coming out of her mouth. It changed, my week changed, it was awesome, and I just want to comment on how much of an impact that can have.
Yeah,
So
it's
thank you,
amazing.
Beth.
Mine's a little bit more personal and reverse, and you'll understand this when you hear it. I want to thank Patty personally because I worked at CMS Consumers during a period before she arrived, and it was indeed one of those situations where we didn't talk a lot about a lot of things, and I was in management. And so now that I teach courses in sustainable business practices and corporate social responsibility, I can actually be proud of my tenure at the company because of the new leadership. So I thank you.
Wow. We're watching micro acts of kindness happening
Right now.
in real time. This is so amazing.
We love it. Right. Well, thank you for sharing. We really appreciate it. We know how hard it can be, and we really hope that you'll take these acts of kindness back to your workplace and put them into practice within the next 2 weeks.
Right. Okay, so what we're going to ask you to do is to make a personal commitment to yourself, to take that card, to schedule time to do those micro acts of kindness in the next 2 weeks. I might even recommend you open up your calendar on your app, schedule them, do them, make them a task on your task list. It really requires intentionality from each and every one of us, but I think what we can actually have now witnessed is the ripple effect and of that positivity. It is really important as a leader to notice when your team is like nailing or succeeding at something. And I think even just that noticing is in itself a micro act of kindness and takes intentionality. So, are you ready? Intentionality starts now. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Wow, another great, inspiring session. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Sarika. I commute to work. I did for 11 years by train down the coast of from San Francisco down to Silicon Valley. And for a month, I kind of challenged myself to do a random act of kindness, which was to make eye contact with someone on the train that I didn't know and smile. And so it was an interesting practice. It's kind of a little experiment that I did. And I have to say that doing that every morning brought me so much joy. And you could see these people who I rode the train with every day who normally were quite blank in the face and we never talked to each other. Suddenly you'd make eye contact with them and their face would light up, and it just created this positive energy in a way that I thought was quite amazing and powerful. So definite thumbs up, definite encouragement for acts of kindness. And again, they don't have to be random. They can also be very direct and very clear, but also their randomness just spreads even more love as well. So before we proceed, I actually want to, we usually do thanks at the end, but I really want to take a moment to thank Chris White. So we've had a lot of comments on just the power of the presentations and the curation of the presentations, the flow, the energy of the speakers. A lot of that has to do with Chris's brilliance and how he and the team thought about who would be great folks on stage, how that energy could flow throughout each day in a way that would kind of give us all energy and give us inspiration. So Chris, thank you very much for that. So we're going to move into a refreshment break from 10 to 10:30, and then we'll move into our second round of concurrent workshops. So again, you have on your name badge the name and room number of the workshop that you signed up for. If you do not have an assignment, check with the staff to see where you can be slotted in. Those workshops will go from 10:30 to 11:45. And then you'll go immediately into lunch after that, from 11:45 to 1. So we'll reconvene back in here at 1 o'clock. So lots ahead of you. Break, workshop, lunch. Have a great time. Thank you.